I never thought the little good deeds I did would come back to me. For 7 straight years, I made sure a hungry kid got something to eat behind the diner where I worked. He was just a skinny black boy who never asked for a thing, but I couldn't stand seeing him hungry. Then one day, my jealous boss set me up, and just like that, I was out of a job. Broke and forgotten, I left the kid one last bag of food with my address tucked inside, praying somehow he'd make it. For 10 years, nothing. Then one cool fall night, a black SUV rolled up in front of my rundown little place in Cleveland. When the door opened, I froze. Out stepped a man I almost didn't recognize, the same boy I used to feed. What he was about to tell me would change my life. The diner where it all started smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease every morning. Old liquor bottles lined the walls, and the red vinyl on the booths was cracked and tired. You could hear the hum of voices mixing with the clatter of plates. Most folks came in for a cheap breakfast before work. But for me, Nancy Taylor, a 60-year-old waitress with gray streaks in my hair tied back tight, this place was everything. I moved fast and quiet, refilling coffee, balancing trays, forcing a smile even when my feet burned. Hardly anyone noticed me unless their eggs were late. But I had a secret routine after every shift. When the day was done, I'd slip out the back door with a small paper sack. Sometimes it was leftovers, sometimes something I paid for with my tips. I'd walk down the alley, my shoes scraping the pavement, until I reached the dumpster. That's where I first saw him. Couldn't have been more than 8. Dark skin, big brown eyes heavy with hunger, clothes worn thin against the cold. He never asked for anything, never begged. He just stood there, shifting from foot to foot like he was bracing for the world to hit him. The first time, I hesitated. But when I handed him a sandwich, he looked at me like he didn't believe it. Like kindness was foreign to him. That's how it started. Day after day, year after year, I fed him. I didn't ask questions. I didn't press him for answers. I just made sure he ate. Pie if there was extra. Soup when it was freezing. A milk carton when I had enough cash. People at the diner noticed. "You're wasting food on some stray," a cook grumbled. Another server muttered, "Kids like that never remember who helped them." I pretended not to hear, but their words cut. Still, I kept feeding him. I started slipping little notes inside the bags, a smiley face, "Stay warm," sometimes just his name, because he'd whispered it to me once so softly I almost missed it. But I never said it to anyone else. It was ours. I brought him bread in the rain, tucking it in my coat to keep it dry. In the summer heat, I froze bottles of water so he'd have something cold. Even when my hands ached from arthritis, I packed that bag and walked to the alley. By the 7th year, he'd grown taller, stronger, but his eyes still carried that same heavy look. Words were rare, but that was okay. The quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable, it was survival. And in that quiet, I really saw him. Not as some homeless kid. Not as someone forgotten. But as a person who mattered. Each paper bag was more than food, it was a promise. The folks at the diner kept whispering. Some mocked me, others rolled their eyes. But I kept going. 7 years. You think you're some kind of saint. That's what they'd whisper and joke when they thought I couldn't hear. But I didn't care. I'd learned a long time ago that the quiet things you do over and over, the ones nobody notices, are the ones that matter most. So I kept walking out that back door every night, that warm paper bag in my hands, never once imagining how much it would come to mean. The back office of the diner always reeked of stale smoke and cheap cologne. That's where Rick Clayton, the manager, held court. He had a thick mustache, hair slicked back like he thought he was somebody, and a smile that never quite touched his eyes. He treated people like they were pieces on a chessboard, easy to replace. And lately, he had his eye on me. It wasn't my tired feet or aching back he noticed. It was the bags. The ones I carried out after closing. Too often. Too quietly. Funny how food keeps going missing after shifts, he muttered one night, his eyes on me. I kept stacking plates, pretending not to hear, but the words stuck like splinters. The co-workers weren't any better. Maybe she's swiping pies, one cook chuckled. Another waitress shook her head. Nah, she's feeding that street kid. I've seen her. The boss isn't gonna like it. And they were right. One Friday night, everything came crashing down. The register was short, $40 missing. Clayton called us all into the back, pacing like a wolf smelling blood. His voice was calm, too calm. Somebody's been taking money. And I don't need to guess who. Every eye turned to me. My stomach dropped. You, he said, pointing. You've been walking out with bags every night. Everyone's seen it. Don't bother playing innocent. I felt my chest tighten. My voice shook. That's food, not cash. I've never touched the till. But he didn't care. You think the owner gives a damn about your sob story? You're done. The room went silent. A busboy leaned toward another. She's been here longer than all of us. They can't just toss her out. The other one shrugged. They just did. Clayton's wanted her gone for years. I stood there frozen. My head was spinning, my throat locked. Years of biting my tongue kept me quiet when I wanted to scream. So I walked. Out the back door, down that same alley, but this time my steps were heavy. The boy was waiting, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked at me, expecting the bag. My hands trembled as I handed it to him. Inside was more than food. I'd slipped in a napkin, the ink smeared where my tears had hit it. I don't work here anymore. They said things I didn't do. But if you ever need help, this is where I live. My shaky handwriting gave him an address. He stared at me longer than usual, his lips parting like he might speak. But no words came. He just nodded, clutching the bag to his chest before disappearing into the night. I stood there long after he was gone, the cold cutting through my coat. I had nothing now, no job, no security, just the faint hope that one day he might remember that address. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then years. No knock ever came. And I learned the hardest truth about kindness: sometimes you pour yourself out, and it's swallowed by silence. Winters came first, the kind that claw right through wool. I learned to layer socks, wear a sweater under my coat, tuck my scarf tight so the wind wouldn't slip down my neck. Mornings smelled like bleach and menthol. I found part-time cleaning jobs, scrubbing other people's kitchens and bathrooms just to get by. My hands ached, but I kept moving. My little house stayed neat, painted a faded blue, its porch creaking like an old friend when I stepped on it. And on the fridge, crooked under a magnet shaped like a pie, sat a folded napkin with an address written in my own slanted hand. I didn't need the reminder. But I kept it there anyway, a promise to myself. If someone ever came knocking, I'd hear it. Some mornings, I'd spot a couple of teenagers in hoodies leaning against the fence, murmuring to each other. Yo, that's a mess. Taylor, one of them would say, nodding in my direction. She's the old lady with the tote bag. Used to feed some kid behind the diner every day. Crazy, right? People forget, the other would shrug. Bet the kid did too. Their voices would fade as I walked by. I'd just lift a hand and keep going. Life became a collection of little moments. A stray cat no one could touch, the bus driver who hummed out of tune, a headline about some young tech founder raising millions, names and numbers that meant nothing to me. I wasn't reading stock reports. Coupons were worth more in my world. Nights were quiet. I brewed weak tea, listened to the radiator hiss, watched the glow of headlights drift across the ceiling. Sundays, I found myself at the church pantry, stacking canned goods into neat pyramids. Sometimes the pastor's wife would try to press money into my hand. I'd smile, gently close her fingers around the bills, and nod toward a mother wrangling two toddlers. Her week looks heavier than mine, I'd say. Then I'd go back to straightening the cans, lining them up just right, breathing only when the door finally shut. Every winter, I knitted one scarf. Same pattern every time, slow and steady, like marking the days. I stored them in a drawer I rarely opened. Spring always came, but I kept knitting. Habit has a way of feeling like prayer. Some months were tight. The electric bill hummed like a low-grade worry in the back of my mind. I picked up extra hours, cleaning a barbershop after closing. The owner would whistle while sweeping up hair, then hand me a soda. "What's up, Ms. T? You good?" "I'm all right," I'd say, rubbing circles on the mirror until it gleamed. "I'm here." Gossip traveled farther than facts. At the corner store, two women by the lotto tickets whispered behind cupped hands. "She's still alone, huh?" "Yeah. Heard she lost that diner job over something shady." "Sad. Some people give till they've got nothing left." I'd pretend to study tomatoes, pressing them for ripeness, letting the words slide off. But they always landed. I just learned how to carry weight without dropping it. The years slipped by like sunsets, slow when you watched, gone if you blinked. The boy's face grew fuzzy at the edges in my memory, but his eyes stayed sharp, steady, bright. Now and then, when some lanky teenager would cross the street and hold a door for me, I'd feel a little warmth in my chest, something close to a laugh. "Look at you. Look how you made it." Then the moment would pass, and the day would keep moving. One humid July night, sleep wouldn't come. The air was heavy, the fan ticked with a crooked rhythm. I sat on the edge of my bed, pressing my knuckles together, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood breathing. Music floated from 3 houses down, a couple argued softly somewhere nearby, and a far-off siren wailed. I stood, padded into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned on the counter. The cool laminate eased the heat in my arms. Seasons turned again. Autumn returned. Leaves fell like turning pages. I raked them into piles, tied them up, stretched my stiff back. Across the street, a young couple moved in, plants, framed art, and a squeaky bicycle. The guy lifted a hand. "Morning." "Morning," I said, a small smile tugging at my face. That same week, at the barbershop, someone mentioned a wild story about some big tech guy, grew up rough, now building schools. Names bounced around like ping-pong balls, fast and excited. I kept wiping mirrors, half listening, letting the words roll past. Schools. Kids. Good. I tucked the thought away like I always did. Then the air cooled, the first frost turning the grass silver. I buttoned my coat carefully, one button at a time. That afternoon, clouds hung low like a heavy lid. I brewed tea, set the mug on the windowsill, and pulled the curtain just enough to watch the street. A delivery van rumbled by, tires whispering over damp pavement. Farther down, a sedan idled, then eased away. Just another day. Nothing unusual. That winter, I rolled the last bit of yarn into a scarf, measuring the tail with my fingers before tying off the final stitch. The room was full of soft, ordinary sounds, the clock ticking, the faint hum of the fan, the quiet clink of a cup on the table. I let out a long breath. The late afternoon light leaned toward blue. Then came a sound I didn't hear often on my street, gravel crunching, heavier than usual. Engines were nothing new around here, but this one was different. Slower. Steady. I didn't move right away. Cars were part of the background, but my hand still found the edge of the curtain. I pinched it just enough to lift. Headlights cut across the porch rail, sharp and clean. A black SUV rolled into view, easing to a stop at the curb, its hood reflecting the pale sky. The engine idled, low and calm, like it had all the time in the world. My fingers tightened on the curtain. I could feel my pulse in my wrist, steady, not startled, just present. I laid the scarf down, smoothing it once with my palms, and stood. The radiator clicked, then went still. The engine outside kept its quiet hum. Breathing slow, I stepped to the door. The handle was cool against my palm. When I opened it, the late autumn air slid over my skin, crisp and sharp. The engine cut off, and the quiet deepened. Then came the crunch of shoes on gravel. A man stepped out. Tall. A dark suit, the kind you only saw in magazines at the barbershop. The door closed behind him with a soft, expensive sound. He stood for a moment, scanning the little blue house like he was memorizing it. Then his eyes found mine, steady, deep, familiar in a way that hit me hard. I gripped the doorframe, my knees loosening. Where do I know those eyes? He walked closer, unhurried, each step measured, like he was carrying years of something heavy. When he reached the porch, he stopped, giving me space. You don't remember me, do you? His voice was low, warm, layered with something I hadn't heard in a decade. I blinked, my lips parting. The silver on his watch caught the fading light. I can't place you. He smiled, and for a heartbeat, I saw it, the boy. The same wide, hungry eyes I used to see in that alley. The same quiet nods. I'm the kid from behind the diner, he said softly. The one you fed every day. The world tilted. My breath caught. My hand tightened on the frame. The alley. The paper bags. The napkins with notes. The last one with my address. Oh my God, I whispered, my eyes blurring. He nodded. His voice softened. That note you gave me, I kept it. I couldn't come back then. I was just trying to survive. But I promised myself if I ever made it out, I'd find you. My throat burned. Tears I'd buried for years pushed up hard. I motioned weakly toward the door. Come in, I said. Inside, the house felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling the space. He looked around at the worn furniture, the neat stack of unpaid bills on the side table. He noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he turned back to me. I made it, he said quietly. Coding. Hustling. Sleepless nights. And somehow, it worked. People know my name now. But none of it, would have happened if you hadn't kept me alive. You never looked at me like I was nothing. You didn't care about the color of my skin. You just saw a kid. And that saved me. My hand flew to my mouth, shaking. Tears burned my eyes. I whispered, all I ever wanted was for you to eat. To be okay. He let out a slow breath. You did so much more than that. You gave me dignity when the world tried to strip it away. The weeks that followed felt unreal, like moving through a dream. He made sure I was safe, really safe, for the first time in years. A new home, warm, bright, no peeling paint, no sagging porch steps. Then he went further. He built a business in my name, one that would keep me steady for life. But the part that broke me came later. He founded an orphanage. Brick by brick, raised in my honor. And above its doors, carved into smooth stone, were the words, the Taylor Home for Children. When the opening day came, reporters crowded the lawn, cameras flashing. He stood at the podium, calm and confident. I sat in the front row, wearing a plain navy dress, my hands folded tight in my lap. When he gestured toward me, his voice carried strong and clear. If not for her, I wouldn't be here today. She fed me when the world wouldn't. She believed I mattered when no one else did. She didn't look at my skin. She didn't ask for anything. She just cared. And that gave me the strength to survive. Gasps rippled through the audience. Some clapped, some wiped at their eyes. Heat rose in my face, my hands trembling, but not from exhaustion this time. From something bigger. From being seen. When the speeches ended, children from the home came running, bright-eyed, laughing, arms flung wide. They wrapped around me, tugging at my sleeves, hugging my legs. I laughed, surprised at the sound, like hearing my own heart again. For the first time in so many years, I felt full. Not because of money, not because of attention, but because the quiet things I gave had bloomed into something far bigger than I could have imagined. Those paper bags of food weren't just meals. They were seeds. Seeds that grew into a man, a mission, and a home for so many more. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses outlast the hardest years. When I fed a forgotten boy, I wasn't just filling his stomach, I was feeding hope.